Hi everyone, I am Dr. Shwetang Bansal. I am a Delhi-based psychiatrist. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the last few months have been difficult for everyone indeed. Even more than the number of people directly infected by the virus is the number of people who are suffering from the psychological impact that the pandemic has had. And as we know that there are a number of countries scrambling to build a vaccine for the virus, we know that for the psychological impact of this pandemic, there will never be a vaccine. It is in light of this that we've launched a mental health series dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and its psychological ramifications. The first segment of the series deals with stress.
Hi, my name is Shrija and I'm 20 years old. For the last few months, I chose not to go home. I'm living with someone I chose to live with, someone I love, someone I'm close to. But I think my insecurities would also arise from the fact that I was too close to someone, and demanding space came with a whole lot of guilt, especially when you're living in their house.
हाय, मेरा नाम अभी है। मैं 26 साल का हूँ और मैं दिल्ली में एक पब्लिक पॉलिसी प्रोफेशनल हूँ। जब से लॉकडाउन शुरू हुआ तब से मैं अपने इस एक कमरे के फ्लैट में बंद हो गया हूँ। पहले ये होता था कि आप लोग ऑफिस से निकल के घर पे आके रिलैक्स करते थे। अब भी ऑफिस भी यही है, रिलैक्सेशन का स्पेस भी यही है, तो वो गैप ख़त्म हो गया है। तो जो स्ट्रेस बस्टर एक्टिविटी थी, चाहे वो घर पे सिर्फ बैठना ही था, तो वो वैसा फील होता नहीं है।
Hello everyone, my name is Ketan Jain. I'm a student from Agra. One of the problems I've been facing primarily is actually my location. I'm from a small town. I did study in Delhi for 4 years and I was planning to settle into Delhi, and this sort of pandemic came and that entire plan just did not work out, and now I'm back at home.
Hi, I'm Manisha. I'm an architect. I am also a mom of 2 young kids, one's 7, the other is 3.5. I think the main difficulty has been the fact that we've had to continue with our work day, trying to do that parallelly while making sure the kids are being engaged, have proper classes, and online education is something that my kids are too young to understand. This has been quite tough.
The most common issues that people are encountering at this point of time are the loss of a routine, the loss of income, the loss of the landmark events that they were supposed to get involved in over the next 6 months or over the next year. So we need to try and focus on those issues. The loss of routine can be handled by creating a new schedule for the new normal. A walk in the park can get replaced by jogging on the spot in the corner of a room to music. As long as we are going to hold on to the fact that life was so and so before the pandemic, we are never going to accept what exists right now. The third point here would be to avoid disruption of life flow as far as possible. What that means is that if there was a landmark event that you had planned for, if it was a college education that you were planning for, if it was marriage that you were planning for, try and not let it get postponed indefinitely, because we do not know when this ends. Try and do whatever you can do while sitting in the confines of your house, while being restricted by the pandemic.
So more than a terrifying pandemic, quarantine was portrayed as the best time to be picking up a skill you haven't had the time to, get back to the work routine you've been postponing for a while. And I think that this notion of productivity is toxic precisely because there's this increasing pressure does not take into account domestic work at all. And I was feeling worthless because I was conditioned into believing that everyday work that goes into the making of a house counts for absolutely nothing.
मुझे हमेशा काफ़ी प्राउड फील होता था कि मैं सुबह जल्दी उठता हूँ, भागता दौड़ता हूँ, अपने ऊपर काम करता हूँ। वो सब चीज़ें बंद हो गई हैं और सब कुछ टीवी में, मीडिया में, न्यूज़ में काफ़ी नेगेटिविटी है। इस समय पे मैंने अब गेमिंग करना शुरू कर दिया, बर्बाद कर रहा हूँ अपना टाइम, सिर्फ इसलिए क्योंकि सिर्फ वही एक तरीका है जब मैं नेगेटिव थॉट्स नहीं आते मेरे को, बाकी हर समय आते हैं।
My relationship with my family, I am not that open to my family. I don't share my problems with them. And so one thing which has really helped me actually is actually to recognize that this insistence on self-care is actually like slightly privileged, and what might actually help is to not build boundaries and separate yourself from your family, friends and your location even further, but to recognize the fact that things are messy and irritating and frustrating, and to deal with that difficulty and to live with that difficulty instead of rushing to solutions.
I've developed my own coping mechanism. I've disengaged from social media. I stopped looking at any of my WhatsApp groups for a few months. Stopped checking the news. I used to know Spanish. I had learned how to play the piano. I rediscovered my old books. I started teaching myself again through podcasts and through Duolingo app. But then I learned to take breaks and attend to the kids. And there's been a lot more flexibility now from working from home, which has helped.
Over millions of years of evolution, human beings have developed three major stress responses. These are the physiological response, the emotional response, and the cognitive response. The physiological response, और जो physical changes हमारी body में आते हैं stress के दौरान, this is the most primitive of the stress responses. The second response is known as the emotional response, जिसमें जब भी हम स्ट्रेस में जाते हैं जो हमारे में फीलिंग्स आती हैं, जैसे कि एंग्शियस फील करना, नर्वस फील करना, घबराहट होना, टेंशन होना, ऐसी फीलिंग होना कि कुछ बुरा होने वाला है, एक पैनिक वाली फीलिंग होना, ये सब जो फीलिंग्स हैं दे कम अंडर द इमोशनल रिस्पॉन्स. थर्ड रिस्पॉन्स होता है जिसको कॉग्निटिव रिस्पॉन्स कहते हैं. दैट इज द मोस्ट एडवांस्ड, मोस्ट डेवलप्ड, मोस्ट सोफिस्टिकेटेड ऑफ द रिस्पॉन्सेस. कॉग्निटिव रिस्पॉन्स में क्या होता है, जो हम एक माइंडफुल रिस्पॉन्स करते हैं कि स्ट्रेसफुल सिचुएशन क्या है, इसमें थ्रेट किस चीज से है और इसको हमने रिस्पॉन्ड कैसे करना है. दिस इज द वन रिस्पॉन्स दैट कैन एक्चुअली हेल्प यू गेट आउटसाइड द स्ट्रेसफुल सिचुएशन. Hans Selye, a Slovak researcher who did a lot of research in the field of stress, in the 70s came out with the general adaptation syndrome. He talked about the alarm phase, in which the individual goes through a state of shock when they suddenly enter a stressful situation, followed by the resistance phase, in which a person consolidates. Here is where the stress responses are kicking into action to extract the person out of the stressful situation. And this is then followed either by the recovery phase or the exhaustion phase. Sometimes the emotional and the physiological responses can overwhelm and cut off the cognitive response, and this leaves a person numb and unable to respond to that particular stressful situation. The third and final point in sharpening our response to stress would be to mindfully neutralize the physiological responses. How do we do that? We do that by doing the basics correct. Having a sleep schedule, trying to avoid caffeine in the evenings, trying to avoid screens when you are in bed, getting good exposure to the sun in the morning if possible, sitting in your balcony. Along with that, eating right. It is important to know that there are certain red flag symptoms which indicate that you need to see a professional. Suicidal thoughts, persistent low mood, persistent anxiety, panic attacks, or disruption with your appetite and sleep patterns. अगर इनमें से कोई भी symptoms over a period of 2 weeks आप में मिल रहे हैं, तो ये इंडिकेट करता है कि आपको क्लिनिकल हेल्प की रिक्वायरमेंट है. My suggestion would be that you consult a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist, most of whom are currently offering services online in the wake of the pandemic. On that note, till our next episode, stay well and take care of yourself.